So, as I was watching this most recent episode of Amphibia, I thought back to the first episode of the second season of Avatar: The Last Airbender. I have been rewatching Avatar for the 13th time, 14th time? I've lost track at this point. But in the first episode of the second season of that show, Aang is deeply conflicted about a situation he is presented with in which he is encouraged to use his godlike avatar state powers to destroy the Fire Nation army and win the war for the united front of the Earth Kingdom forces, the Water Tribes, and anyone in the Fire Nation who's disaffected with their policies. Aang is very skeptical of this because he's terrified of the Avatar state. He knows how powerful it can be, but he also knows that when he is in that state, he is not really him. He loses that sense of humanity that makes him quite admirable as a hero. His compassion, his pacifism, his desire to solve problems with contemplation and with dialogue, and with at least trying to figure out a new and clever solution instead of just trying to dominate and control his enemies. And it is his loss of these qualities that are so key to his view of himself that terrifies him even more so than his lack of control and his feeling that he's not really him when he's in the Avatar state. Rousseau talks a lot about pity being a foundational characteristic of humanity. In pity is everything non-beast-like about us. It's the ability to go outside ourselves and comprehend the sorrow of another, not for the sake of self-interest, but for the sake of a higher moral purpose. This coldness of an altered, all-powerful state is what I thought of when I saw Anne in Amphibia struggling with the issue of whether she should continue being so adamant to use her Calamity Box powers in the future. Now, the idea of a forbidden power that gives one the ability to attain great wealth or great political authority at the expense of one's morality is as old as storytelling itself. The first examples that come to my mind are not just the Ring of Power from The Lord of the Rings, but all the way back to the Ring of Gyges from Plato's Republic. But what Avatar and Amphibia are doing is slightly different, and that's why I mentally grouped them together. These are powers that the protagonist initially believes are good. They are powers that allow the protagonist to win a decisive victory, and in doing so, ward off the forces of darkness and help those they care about. It's only after the battle that the protagonist starts to question their powers. Aang dominates the Fire Nation Navy in the North Pole to such an extent that those on his side are left in wonder and those on the opposing side are left in horror. It is very much the upsurgence of the supernatural and the mythical into the realm of the ordinary and the political. In the case of Anne, she only turns the tide in the battle against Andrias because she uses her Calamity Box powers. Without those powers, the battle would have gone in a much darker direction. And yet, these powers are not satisfying for Anne or for Aang. Now, I am not saying the powers Anne has are essentially evil. I think that's too simplistic. But I am saying that their influence on Anne, and Anne's influence in the world when she's under the thrall of these powers, is less than wholly beneficial. While I have quite a few problems with the whole Aang Ozai fight at the end of Avatar, and I think it's kind of an awkward way to wrap up such a beautiful and heartfelt show with a conflict between two characters who have no personal problems with each other. I nonetheless appreciate that Aang is not using the Avatar state in order to defeat Ozai. He has the ability to do so, and yet he pulls back. The real struggle in this battle is not Aang against Ozai, but Aang against his powers, and more than that, against the idea of unchecked political authority, the ability to do whatever you want because you believe that you are acting in the interests of what is good and just. That Aang is able to pull back from the brink of giving into this desire to use his powers even when those powers contradict against his moral sense, that is the real triumph of Aang's battle. That's what's really interesting about that battle. And I really hope that Amphibia continues these parallels with the Avatar and with the Avatar state by having Anne withdraw from her powers, or at least have such a negative experience with her powers that she openly doubts whether these powers should even exist. She becomes far more skeptical about these powers. I believe that Anne will triumph, but she will not triumph through the use of her powers. Now, the word choice at the end of the episode that's used when Anne is referring to her powers, that is not incidental. She does not just express dismay that her powers drain her, that would be ordinary, or even that she's relying too heavily on them. That, again, would be ordinary. No, Anne goes a little further than that. She says that her powers are actively bad. That she feels this intense sense of alienation when she's using her powers. She doesn't trust herself with the powers, and she doesn't trust the powers themselves. She's not a bad person, and I appreciate how the episode lingers on how much she has grown and changed throughout Amphibia, but she is still impulsive, as demonstrated by how she was willing to just about kill Sasha just because she was angry with her, and her powers play on that impulsiveness. They exaggerate that impulsiveness, and this is probably not going to be good for Anne in the future. Either she draws away from her powers and renounces them, perhaps, or the powers might destroy her, or at least her conception of herself as a good and moral person. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can, and you want to see more videos like this one. I'm sorry this one is a little short. I've been extremely busy today, and as you can see, I am not in my normal location. But I did want to make a video about this episode because it's really fascinating, less in what it explicitly says than in what it implies. I can't wait to see how the show goes off those implications in the future. Anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. It will be coming soon. I promise you that. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.